Whitley Strieber, and you're listening to My Alien Life.
But I felt a presence, and it was call Bud Hopkins. And I'm thinking, oh God, now I'm really going crazy. Call Bud Hopkins. Oh, you got to be kidding. Call Bud Hopkins 3 times. So I look up directory assistants in New York and Bud Hopkins, and I call the number, and I get, hello. You can agree to have information downloaded into you, and then you can just agree to have that information blocked until you need that information later. I said, I can't believe I'm talking to you. He said, I can't believe you are either. He said, I have a answering machine in my basement just to record calls of people coming in so they can talk about their experience, and then I can see if I want to contact them. I just happened to be at the open door at the top of the stairs, and I thought, I'll answer that call.
My Alien Life is recorded high atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is heard all over the world, and you can listen everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you'll find links to every episode, stories, photos, and much more. I'm your host, Cam Logan. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three,
1988, Tom Sanger was led to a place in the North Cascades of Washington State. What would come next would be decades of contact, downloaded information, and what he calls the game changer of game changers. It's big. That and more is coming right up on My Alien Life. Tom, I've been reading about you. You have a YouTube video that is pretty cool and really piqued my interest. But 1988, is that kind of the pivotal point, the nexus in your life when things started to happen?
Yeah, that was the that was actually a very traumatic beginning to the whole thing. It was kind of like getting hit with a 2x4. So it wasn't a gradual thing of me having interest and et cetera, et cetera. And I know that happens with other people as well, where it's just bang, and then you're in it.
So at the time, how old were you? And you really didn't have any experience, you're telling me. You just came upon this life-changing event all of a sudden without any introduction.
Correct. I had seen... I'd never studied it. I did watch a documentary years before, and I watched it as a joke. I thought, it's 2 a.m. I watch this stupid thing. And it was pretty intriguing. I thought, well, that's interesting. Then about 1984, we were backpacking up in the Cascades in Washington State, sitting by the fire, and this light came over. And this is 1984, so you don't have as much space junk and satellites up there or whatever.
Right.
But it did a direct 90 degree, just boom, boom. And still, we didn't. I mean, what do you do when you see that, That went for, another 4 years or something before everything hit the fan.
That's a good year, though, for UFOs. And I tell my story a lot. And, there was a lot of things happening in my life then and previous years, maybe 10 years prior and afterwards. But how old were you in 1984?
Let's see. Now let's see. I was born in 1950.
Okay.
So that would be, what is it? 34?
34
1984,
years old,
34
yeah.
years old, yes.
Yeah. So at that time, you and I were kind of watching the same thing on TV and different movies about UFOs and paranormal events and things like that. And I remember, early at my grade school, we were passing around the book, The Amityville Horror. So that wasn't really an indoctrination to knowing anything about UFOs, but you were actually hadn't had much of an indoctrination. And so basically what happened between 1984 and 1988? Any experiences at all?
No, nothing. That happened in 84, and then it was later that I saw that documentary. I think it was called UFOs Are Real or something like that. But it was actually, a really good documentary on the subject for the year. They didn't make fun of it, and some pretty good stuff in there. So I think that gave me a little tweak right there that, maybe there's something to this. But it didn't set me on any kind of course. I just saw a documentary. It could have been a documentary on lions, or, it could have been anything. Right. But no, 1988 is when I get smacked upside the head.
So you were living in the Seattle area. Were you an avid outdoorsman? Did you have a lot of experience up in the mountains hiking in that area?
Yeah, that was actually my thing, was walking. I used to love to walk. I don't think I even owned a car at that time. So walking around town, working, but also doing that. But then getting out, if I could, when I had a car, and going backpacking in the mountains. And that was just your normal backpacking, weekend type thing, stay a night over up there. And of course, the Cascades are incredible mountains to hike in.
I think they're probably some of the more beautiful mountains in the nation. I mean, you have a mixture of snow-capped peaks and some really, really thick rainforest, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And the farther north you go, the more it almost seems like you're in the Himalayas. I mean, it's amazing.
So go into this period in 1988 when you find yourself hiking, and describe and take as much time as you need to go through the actual experience that you had that changed your life so suddenly and traumatically and unexpectedly, obvious.
Yeah. Well, usually I don't even talk about this part of it because it's I almost lose some credibility. And in some ways, it's not that important to me. But the beginning was completely bizarre. I had found a copy of, what's his name? He's a therapist and an artist from New York. He's deceased now. Missing Time. Bud Hopkins, Missing Time. Mm-hmm. And I read that, again, kind of like that documentary, like, well, this will be kind of silly. And I read it and went, wow, that's really interesting. The interesting thing about that book is, I think it maybe even be the very first book that says this experience could have happened to you. In other words, it's not about Betty and Barney Hill or somebody else, but that it could be something that could happen to you or anybody else, right?
Right.
So that was really intriguing to me. And I knew quite a bit about regression therapy at that time. And I believe it was in that book, there was some regression work. And I felt like the therapist didn't do a very good job. So I thought, I'm going to write Bud Hopkins and say, hey, that part could have been better. So I thought, well, how do you get in touch with Bud Hopkins? And so I went through, that's right, I was going to write a letter. So I found a way, the publisher and whatever, found a way to write a letter. And I sat down and I was going to write, this is why I don't tell people about this. I was going to write, Dear Mr. Hopkins, your book's great. Therapy could have been better, blah, blah, blah. I wrote, Dear Mr. Hopkins, I believe this experience has happened to me. I have a strange mole on the side of my face, almost like automatic writing. And I go into the bathroom and I look, and there's this little scab on the side of my face, and I scratched it and it came off, and there's this, I still have it, the little hole that's there. And I hadn't had any kind of injury or anything like that. Here's a scab from nowhere. Why would I even say that? And when I scratched it off, I went into a complete PTSD state. I couldn't talk. I was in total traumatic state, just like that, just bam. And I went for about an entire day where I couldn't talk. And then I went to a friend's house, and instead of them flipping out about what was happening with me, they just sat me down. I sat there, and I eventually got the words out. This is where it gets really bizarre. I had to choke these words out. If you remember this, it will kill you. Now, I found out with a therapist later that he was running into this when he was working with contactees of phrases that the ETs program into you so you don't remember your experiences. So things like if you talk about this, people will laugh at you. There was mine. He had a couple others that he uncovered in therapy, and he didn't know that this had happened to me. So that was a twist on the ET phenomenon. I don't know if anybody else knows that they can use these phrases to block you from even looking at what has happened with you. But after I got those words out, I could function again. And then what's really odd about it, a lot of people at that point would just flip out, I just kind of went with it, which was very strange. And I got the idea, and I still kind of have that, of don't read anything, don't, just let the experience be what it is on its own. So
let me just jump in here,
go
though.
ahead.
I'm wondering why you don't like to tell this part of the story, because obviously, Bud Hopkins, he did write about hypnosis and many victims and how they're able to recall in detail about their experiences that left scars. Of course, all of them or most of them had a lot of trauma and effectively had their memory erased. So what you're saying isn't all that unusual. I mean, obviously it's unusual for you, but I think it's a huge part of your story.
Yeah, that's true. However, if I bring it up to someone who says, oh, you're interested in the UFO phenomenon, I kind of steer away from that because it just sounds bizarre to most people. If there is someone who's already deep into it, I could tell them that, but I've maybe only told the story 4 or 5 times to people. That's about it. But it gets surreal after that. So, I'm actually going along with this, which last thing you think you do, and then I get this seemed like some kind of ethereal being in this room, my room, telling me to call Bud Hopkins. So I didn't see anybody. I didn't actually hear anybody, but I felt a presence, and it was call Bud Hopkins. And I'm thinking, oh God, now I'm really going crazy. Call Bud Hopkins. Oh, you got to be kidding. Call Bud Hopkins 3 times. So I look up directory assistants in New York and Bud Hopkins, and I call the number, and I get hello. And I said, is this Bud Hopkins? And he goes, his hesitation, he goes, yeah. I said, I can't believe I'm talking to you. He said, I can't believe you are either. He said, I have a answering machine in my basement just to record calls of people coming in so they can talk about their experience, and then I can see if I want to contact them. I just happened to be at the open door at the top of the stairs, and I thought, I'll answer that call. So there, now I'm talking to Bud Hopkins. And, you know, this sort of stuff has gone on for years, to the point where I just throw up my hands and go, okay, yeah, I got it. You know, this experience is bizarre.
Now, wait a minute. You got to back up and talk about the Bud Hopkins experience, because now
Yeah.
that's part of the experience. So did you actually, were you able to have an actual conversation with Bud Hopkins?
Yeah. I said, well, you know, this is what happened. I scratched off a little scab and have this pit on the side of my face. And He says, well, write me, tell me your progression with this, and I'll make sure to pull your letters, right? So then I did progress with this very quickly. And, well, to tie in Bud Hopkins with this, since I was an avid backpacker, there's a book called 101 Hikes in the North Cascades. And in that book is a hike to Winchester Mountain. And a little tiny, tiny microscopic print in there almost, below the picture or something. It says the Pleiades as an actual mountain. And I was aware of the Billy Meyer stuff and Pleiades and that sort of thing. I heard about that. And so I, hiked up there. But I actually invited Bud, called him up and said, if you're ever out here, let's take a hike up there and maybe the ETs will show up. He said, oh, no. He said, they're into trickery. Don't trust them, And, here's Bud Hopkins saying that. And I thought, I'm not contacting Bud Hopkins again, because that's not where I'm at with this. So I got through the trauma very quickly and all the fear of being abducted and all that, and went more for the positive aspects of it. And
why do you think that?
Be afraid,
Yeah. Why do you think that was, though? I mean, obviously it's traumatic. I can see where a human being would have, part of your mind would have this disbelief and a disconnect, but then there's the reality of it all. So was there two sides of your mind fighting, or did you accept it 100%?
And that is a good question. I think down deep, everybody is no one knows exactly how it works, but there's a spiritual aspect to everybody. And down deep, I think I knew that I was almost like, I wouldn't say destined, but that I was to do this stuff, and that it wasn't a negative thing, and I needed to pursue it. It's just on a deeper level than all the other stuff, where I could be afraid of it and so on. And times when I'd be driving up the mountains, my knuckles were white in the steering wheel, But down deep, I knew that I needed to pursue this and that I was dealing with something positive. So I even went way back then. There was a UFO or ET. group. What do they call those groups where you get together and talk about things and all that? Anyway, had one in Seattle. I went there. Every single person was totally paranoid, and it was all about the Greys and being abducted. And I went, wow, I'm past that, So that's, when I started going up to the Pleiades mountain. That's way up on the Canadian border, just above the volcano Mount Baker. And literally half that mountain, the back half, if you want to call it that, is in Canada, and the southern half is in the United States, which is kind of cool to have a mountain in both countries, kind of like the ETs are sharing the experience, right?
Exactly.
But that's when we had our first real deal UFO encounter.
You said they.
And later, through regression, found out that it was the ET encounter, definitely.
You said they. Who was with you?
That's a old hiking friend of mine, Kareen. And we were part of a hiking group, and then we said, the heck with the hiking group, and we do our own little hikes all over, mostly out of that book, But she's up there, almost like a soccer mom sort of person. Their kids were already grown up and gone, and she had no interest in the subject, but she wasn't against it in any way. Just kind of like, I hope you're having fun with it.
So you had talked about it with her then? Beforehand.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was that conversation like? How do you bring that up back then?
Oh, that was so long ago. I don't know. I was just, I just tell people what was going on. I had my own way of doing it, which was rather than tell people what was going on, I'd say, well, what do you think of the phenomenon? So if you run into people who are avidly religious, they might say it's the devil. And at that point, I just say, yeah, I guess so. You don't want to talk to them about it. So I'd find out where they're at, and most people are pretty darn interested. So she was, a hint on the positive side, but neutral, It was my thing. That's fine, So that's when we had our first major experience was up there. And that was can't get the exact time, but it had to be around August or September of 1989.
So was your intent to go up there and share an experience, or at least for you to have an experience? Okay. So then how did you prepare for that, and describe what happened?
Yeah, to take people back technologically, I took a cassette player, a little cassette player, because there were no CDs or no, iPhones or anything like that. A lousy little cassette player and some kind of new agey type of cassettes up there. So we could play mood music while we lay out and see if anybody wanted to show up, So we're playing all kinds of music on this thing, and laying out in sleeping bags, freezing cold up there. And 1988, again, you're not looking at satellites all night long like you would now. So nothing, we were laying around for a good 2 hours and nothing going on. So to the tent, and I had, for backpacking, it was a pretty big tent, and it was a dome tent with a big door in the front and a window in the back that was so big it was almost like a door. So when you're in this tent, I position it so you're looking out at Mount, anybody listening in can go look it up, Mount Larrabee and the Pleiades. You're looking out to the north with that. And to the south window, you're looking at the big volcano Mount Baker. So quite a view. So we go in the tent, and I had brought up Wendell Stevens' hardcover book, UFO Contact from Reticulum. or either reticuli or reticulum. That's a big hardcover book. And I bring up a cassette player that's, pretty good size, and a tent that's really heavy. And this is a hard hike going up there, right? So I'm lugging all this extraneous stuff. And I put on the music of Kim Robertson, Celtic harp music. And I was going to read something out of the book, like Betty Bye's story to Corrine. So I just opened it anywhere. She's already laying down, ready to go to sleep. We got our boots off. We're in our sleeping bags. And the first thing I read was, "I look straight ahead of me." That's what I read. And she sits up and looks out the front door facing Mount Larrabee and Pleiades and American Border Peak. She said, "What's that?" And there's this light going along, relatively low on the horizon. Well, that happens to be the Canadian route of airplanes going in and out of Vancouver. So there are lots of airplanes going there all night. No big deal. So for her to sit up and go, "What's that?" And then this light goes across and gets between the big spire, American Border Peak, and Mount Larrabee, this big red rock mountain, right between it, and stops dead. And then does a 90-degree, not directly over our heads, but more to the west, starts doing that. Now we are literally both in the door of the tent. That's how big the door was. Squeezing the door of the tent, putting our boots on, so we can go have a contact experience with ETs. And this is the soccer mom doing this with me. So we go down a little bit. There's like a little alpine meadow, probably 50 yards down. And we're watching this thing go overhead. Now it's gone from west to east, stopped dead, and now it's going directly north to south. 90-degree, no turn, just stop and boom. I'm looking at this thing while I'm walking, and it's a solid white light, no running lights, and now we're looking at it to the side. Now, anybody looking at an airplane to the side will see the running lights. No running lights. The light was about, I wouldn't say quite as big, but Venus in the night sky. So, bigger than the normal star. And we're watching it go down towards the volcano. We go down to the spot as her as well. We wanted to be picked up. Where did that even come from with her, right? Next thing we know, we're back up at the tent. And we're in this highly altered state, just Dingyland high. And we didn't think anything about it. And we just went back in and went to sleep, which is oddly kind of normal with the ET experience, where you just kind of blow something off and go, "Oh." So that was our first major experience. And then I received regression work on that. Wow, way up in 1999 or who knows what. And we actually were picked up, taken off the planet. We're told something about a grid system and how these mountains up there fit in with a grid, almost like a meridian type grid. And then taken even farther away, we could see the Earth as a whole, and we could see how the Earth from space, like the ISS and so on, almost looks like it has an aura.
Right.
And we were told that it is really almost a living being, the entire system. And I know there was more, but there's a phenomenon with this where you can agree to have information blocked. So those were the points, that I needed to know, and I'm sure there was lots more. And the guy was about.
Well, hold on 1 second.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
What do you mean that you can make an agreement to have information blocked? I'm not following that. I mean, I know where you're going with that,
Yeah.
but where do you get that information, and why does it happen? And did you make a conscious choice to have this information blocked?
Yeah, yes, and that is even better explained in our next major. The really big whammy experience was the next one, but a lot of people think they just have their minds erased, which clearly to me there are negative beings out there who do the abductions and the stuff that's you don't want to have happen to you, and then they block your mind or whatever they do with the information, however that works. But I knew that there's also this phenomenon of you can agree to have information downloaded into you, and then you can just agree to have that information blocked until you need that information later.
Okay.
So there's nothing forced about it. You go, yeah, okay, I can understand, why you need to do this. Go for it. So then you only get a memory. You get these little tiny memories of things. And then later, maybe even years later, some of that information is released. It might be time released due to a certain date, or event release where suddenly you have this aha brilliant moment and you think it's your own idea, and then you realize, oh, wait a second, no, that's not my idea. So that's happened a lot with me, to where I know when something is my idea and something is theirs that has all of a sudden gone pop, in my consciousness.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very subtle. I always tell my friends who are into this, I say, read the experience. They give you this stuff almost like puzzle pieces, and learn to really look at it and read it and go, oh, I got it. I see what they're trying to say.
So over the years, you're given bits of information that you need to disseminate or should disseminate. Is it possible that most of us can be getting this information, we just ignore it?
That's possible. There's also the possibility that I don't know if you call it upload. Would that be upload or download? Anyway, the information put into their psyche. There might be lots and lots and lots of people who have had the information put in, and nothing has happened with them yet. So nothing has been released. But at maybe a certain point in the future, things will be released. That's another possibility. I actually think that that's probably true. So if there are events, let's just say the ETs have it all planned out for decades or centuries, for all we know, for ET disclosure, not going through the government or any of that nonsense. They may have already downloaded thousands or millions of people, for all we know. That's conjecture.
So basically, they're forcing information. Well, maybe not forcing, but
No.
but they're somehow transmitting information to individuals for whatever reason, and we don't know what that is. And maybe it's the same message to everybody. Maybe everybody has their own individual message. I mean, it could be anything. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, but if they were going to do, if I were ETs and wanted to do disclosure, like disclosure event that just changes everything. That would be a pretty smart way to do it. Get volunteers to go on board or however, whatever, and put this information there in their mind, with them agreeing to have it blocked, with them understanding why it's blocked. And then later on, due to events, all of a sudden this information is released all over, maybe even all over the planet. That'd be pretty smart. But, people can look at that and go, oh, that's science fiction. Well, maybe it is. But if it's not, wow.
Well, I think it's all science fiction to us, just because, we're getting this information, assuming we're getting this information, and there's the possibility that this is such a race or species that is so advanced that there's a great possibility that we couldn't process the information anyway. So we're getting it in a fashion or a way that makes it easier for us to digest and actually do something with. So it's a very unique process, something we're not used to, and it could be part of the whole indoctrination. I don't know, but it's an interesting take, and it is also very similar to other stories, but it seems like everybody has kind of their own spin, and this is interesting.
Yeah. I kind of look at it that people are compartmentalized, and everybody has their own little ability. Some people are better at science and whatever. Everybody has their own little thing they can do. So it's almost like a corporation or military operation, whatever, where you have people who are compartmentalized in what they can do. And you get a puzzle piece when you're compartmentalized. And the only way to get the larger picture is to interact with other people with their puzzle pieces. Then all of a sudden, more and more pieces are put together, and you start to see the bigger picture. Which is almost like a Zen sort of thing. If you're a daycare teacher, you don't grab the kid's crayon and do the picture for them,
One of the things, though, that occurs to me and that I see over and over and hear over and over again, that's a bit problematic when you look at it that way, because you have all these people who have all these different takes and all these different experiences. And you kind of mentioned that when we first started, but, in your inability or to talk about that first part of your story and about it being believable and whatever. Well, people... You often hear someone tell their story, and they get a lot of criticism because there are people out there who don't like that version, or they don't like somebody else's version because it's not like their own. But then again, there's
very good point.
There's so many people that have such a different story and a different take that I think that you just brought it up, and I don't know if you're going to go there, but to me it sounded like, you get these people together and you start comparing this or comparing notes or comparing experiences, but it's not so apparent. It's not it's not on some kind of plane where you can transmit this information or speak this information to another person, but it's something beyond our normal scope of communication that we should be comparing notes in order to understand each other better, because we're not doing it verbally.
Right. And there's that synchronistic element to it where you'll meet someone, let's say, and maybe a little hesitant about talking about the stuff. And once they get into it, all of a sudden, there's all these parallels.
Right.
You go, wow. And wow, and wow, which is a very common thing for people to say is wow. Because these puzzle pieces fit together a lot of times. Very interesting. So, to me, we're dealing with these intelligences that are, we can't even imagine, really, their level. And getting back to the daycare analogy, it's almost like we're children to them. We're kind of like children that they're nurturing along.
Well, in a way, we are.
Yeah, I think so.
One of the more profound theories that I think about, and was thinking about it today. You brought up the word synchronicity, and I posted something yesterday about universal spontaneous synchronization, which basically it's a synchronization of, it could be anything, but if we're talking about people and thought patterns and how we express ourselves, we're not there yet. We don't have any kind of spontaneous synchronization going on right now with communication, because we're so unable to communicate one-on-one a lot of the time, and definitely, as a group, as a species, we're unable to communicate effectively. So it's interesting that there could be some sort of attempt to initiate some sort of universal spontaneous synchronization of communication between our species before we actually communicate with a higher intelligence. And that's what I was thinking about yesterday.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, because that would be almost like, people look for the missing link,
Right.
That's like that would be a link. So, when this first started with me way back then, I got the idea that I had a job, a title, and that I was a liaison between ETs and normal humans. That was my job title. So that's sort of the same thing, is having that little missing link that takes us to this other place. Because let's face it, if all of a sudden, just out of the blue tomorrow, we could all communicate telepathically, that wouldn't go over very well.
Well, it really doesn't matter how and where you travel or when you travel. I mean, there's obvious steps to get you there. It doesn't matter if you do it mentally, physically, or however, whether it be distance or time. I mean, there's always a steps that need to be taken, and there's a synchronicity.
Transition,
there.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, transition to it, yeah. So an interesting thing is there are certain, I guess you might say, phrases or words that have occurred over and over for me. And I, realized early on, those are not my ideas. Those are theirs, And one of them was, they won't do anything to harm the children. Now that would be the, positive ETs, because I'm pretty darn convinced they're negative ones, and to heck with them. But they won't do anything to harm the children. Then my friend, because I had received regression sessions from a therapist friend of mine here in professional therapist here in Tucson. And one time he said, oh my goodness. He said, when you say they won't do anything to harm the children, they're talking about the human race. And I went, oh, they view us as children. I went, holy cow.
So at what point did you decide on regression hypnotherapy, and why? Because, I mean, obviously it's not for everybody. It can be traumatic. It can be bring up things that there's some things that you may not want to know about. Were you having trouble, or did you just want to dig deeper, and was this a search for information?
Well, even though I was pursuing the positive aspects of the phenomenon, I had to go, there's just something built in with it where a lot of people experience real PTSD with it. And I've gone through holy hell with this for a lot of years. It just seems to be part of it. And you know who Bob Dean was?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob Dean is from Tucson. And Bob Dean set up a thing called Stargate.
Right.
And he wanted to have therapists all around the country on hotlines for people so people could call in, talk about their experiences. So I think he set up a preliminary deal with that, and I read about it somewhere. So I called the hotline, and I got this guy, Kelly, who's a professional therapist with the letters after his name and, the whole deal, and a practice. And we decided to do some regression work, and we ended up doing several years worth of regression work. So I've looked at a lot of different things with that. He's a very good therapist too. He does not lead the witness.
So, Bob Dean had a theory about the government and having a classified document, and I believe it was called the assessment.
Yes.
And
right.
and it had to
That
do
is,
with it had to do with threats by aliens, directed toward Earth. And
right. Yeah. I actually met with Bob Dean at a restaurant, and we sat down and talked about, matter of fact, he wanted to, he and his wife at that time wanted to go up to the Pleiades mountain with us. And that never came about, but I got to sit down with him. Yeah, his stuff kind of is, any of the negative stuff and all that, I kind of went, well, if it's true, I want to know about it, but I'm not going to do anything with it.
Well, I guess there was a conclusion that there was no threat and everything was all good, but I really don't know much more than that, including, what that document actually looked like and who wrote the document and where it came from.
Yeah.
So that would be of more interest to me, I think.
That's a little more nuts and bolts sort of stuff, and I always stayed away from that. People say, what do you think of the show Ancient Aliens? I said, I don't watch it. I don't research this stuff or anything. And if the ETs want to contact me, they kind of do in their own way. And then I'm off and running again. I've gone for big lapses of nothing, thinking, well, I guess it's all over. And then all of a sudden, there it is. Something triggers it, and I'm off and running with it again, So I definitely don't get into all the conspiracy theories and all that sort of thing.
It's endless.
Yeah, and I've run into, back in the 90s, we had a little group on the internet, and we actually took apart this rather prominent guy because we saw that people were buying into him, and we went, wait a minute, this stuff doesn't seem like it's real. And he clearly turned out to be a disinformation agent. Very clearly. So he was putting the stuff out there to actually harm the phenomenon. Very interesting. But yeah, we took him apart, and his springs went springing all over, and he went crazy. It's kind of fun. I won't even mention who he was. He might still be around. I don't know.
Disinformation is fairly prevalent. That's one of the things that I'm really interested in as well, only because I want to know what the incentive is, what the motive is for this disinformation. I really want to find out why. And to me, it seems like we've come to a point where we've almost lost the reasoning and reason why there was disinformation, but it's still super interesting to me. And I'm sure it has something to do with national security, but beyond that, it's my mind changes daily, I think, on disinformation.
Yeah. a lot of my stuff is subjective. But we had one regression session where I expected to go into some sort of incident having to do with ETs. And it was kind of odd because I just started talking, even though I didn't really know this stuff. I just started talking about the greater blueprint of the whole ET phenomenon, that you have a negative lineage and a positive lineage, and that it's very similar to here on Earth, where you have your psychopaths on one side and then people who are just, almost angelic on the other, right? And you just have this lineage running down that runs on more like a hypnotic basis. And then you have the more positive elements. And there are different levels of that, going all the way up to probably even the ethereal, where they don't even have bodies. But the folks I've dealt with, for sure, are the little Zeta Reticula guys, and one individual of that group who's my contact guy. And then beyond that, finally, after 30 years of, Pleiades, of all people on the planet, me going up to a mountain called the Pleiades, you'd think I'd have something about Pleiadians, right? Nothing for 30 years. And then all of a sudden I started to have direct communications with them. And, wasn't like a big channeled thing. They'd only last like a minute or two. And the second time it happened, is out of the blue. It's like my mind would just suddenly, almost like curtains opening up, and this very compassionate communication would happen, and I'd communicate back with them. And then it would just close. The curtains would close afterwards. And the second time it happened, the very first thing they said, it's not like a voice, but, I don't know how to describe it, but clearly, actual words, was, yes, we are the Pleiadians. Just right out of the blue after 30 years.
And how is this communication initiated, and in what form are they communicating?
It wasn't even initiated. It just all of a sudden was there. So that's happened twice. And then another time that was a little different, but it was definitely the same, very compassionate. So not like words like we're talking now, but I don't know, how do you even describe that? It's in my mind. Clearly it's not me thinking these things, because it's very different than my thoughts.
Although your brain could, automatically you're going to ask questions. There's going to be questions in your mind. There's going to be questions that you haven't even thought of yet, but things. You can have these questions. They're in your mind. They're accessible in some way, I'm assuming. And if they're able to perceive that, there's no reason why they couldn't answer you the same way, just by.
Yeah. Well, if
you would just know.
Yes, exactly. So pretty much everybody who's involved with this, who's had experience, says it's done with telepathy. So, going 30 years with nothing, everybody else, well, not everybody else, but all these people channeling supposedly, and, that sort of thing. And me, I've got nothing for 30 years. And then all of a sudden this happens. And it wasn't me being just in some delusional state or wanting to have this happen. It just was there. What's interesting is we were actually driving up at the base, going up towards Mount Baker, the volcano, when this happened. And there was a car behind me with this woman in it. The driver of my vehicle said, "Wow, I really feel funny." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I feel really emotional." And and this is a tough guy. He's climbed Mount Rainier. He used to be a search and rescue. He's a foreman, a construction foreman, right? And he's just about crying while he's driving. 2 minutes later, this is what happens with me. It's just this veil opens up, Turns out, car behind me, a woman in that car had the same experience when I had mine.
Wow.
She had the same wasn't the same exact communications, but the same thing happened to her. So the ETs have these ways of kind of making it so you can't just blow it off as, oh, well, it's just my imagination. But the communications were very interesting. At first I'm going, wow, what is this? And then I'm realizing I am communicating with somebody very compassionate. And I started to apologize, saying, I'm really sorry. All these years, I've gone for lots of dry spells. I haven't done anything with this stuff. I could have done more. And the message was, oh, no. We did not want you to do anymore. You've done just fine with it. Just relax with that. And then there were just a couple other things, and all of a sudden it closed up. I remember thinking, oh, I'm just making this up, and that's when it kind of closed up, and I was back to just the normal, dull me. And I realized, wow, that was real, And then it was a year or two later, we're at the same location, but I'm with a friend driving up the mountain, and in a rental car, and we're driving along, and all of a sudden, boom, it opens up again. And that's when they write it. First thing, yes, we are the Pleiades, just like that. Just very casual. And that was very emotional for me after 30 years or 25 or whatever the heck it was.
So why do you think they waited so long to basically let you in on who they were and more insight on what's been going on?
I think a couple things. They wanted me to run through the test of showing that, I'm willing to do this stuff. Also running me through all the garbage of all the people who channel the Pleiadians for money and this sort of stuff, Pleiadian, if you go on YouTube or anywhere, and the Billy Meyer nonsense and so on. So I had to get through that without falling into that sort of thing. And then also I had to not have my mind set on, oh, am I being communicated with now? Oh, maybe now. And going for all these years with nothing. So that when they really did come through, now if they ever do it again, I know it's them. Because it's very, I don't know how to describe it, but there's an element to it that's very emotional, like I say, very, very compassionate, almost like them saying, yeah, we've been through this ourselves, sort of thing, empathetic. So now I know if it ever happens again, I know it really is from them and not something else. But, they were 1 minute communications. That's about it.
But meaningful. Did it leave you with a thought of you need more, you want more, that wasn't enough?
No, it was more like, wow. To go through this all these years and still have in the back of my mind, not that I'm making things up with it, but you go up to a mountain called it's on the You can look it up in or on the internet. Just look up Pleiades hiking Mount Baker, and you're going to find, the hikes up to this mountain called the Pleiades.
So where'd the name come from?
I don't
And
know.
when? Huh.
Have no clue what that would be.
Because that's
which
really,
I find
that's
very odd.
Yeah.
I find that very interesting.
It's very interesting.
And the fact that you have the Cascades running north and south, or south and north, however you want to look at it. Mm-hmm. And this mountain range ends at Canada.
Right.
But it's going east-west. It doesn't make any sense. And then it's red rock. And then it's got a gold mine going right into the side of the mountain. And I don't know why, someone from Canada just sends me an email. I don't know how they even knew to send me an email telling me about the Canadian side is all riddled with gold mines. So this mountain is full of gold. There's gold mines all over there. Matter of fact, when Karina and I had our experience up there, we had gone up Gold Run Pass, it's called. That's in that hiking book. So you have anybody listening in, just look up Gold Run Pass, look up Winchester Mountain, Mount Baker. Now, I think there's a Winchester Mountain in Maine or something, but Winchester Mountain, Mount Baker, and then Pleiades as a hiking. You can't actually go up onto the Pleiades. It's just this ridge of no one can go. Climbers can't even go up there. But it's on the map. But I wondered about that.
Well, I
think that's
Pleiades,
one of those ET influenced things where they just named it that.
I mean, it comes from Greek mythology, but I just wanted, I'm wondering why. And I don't know how many, I don't even remember, geologically speaking, in the state of Washington, there's how many volcanoes. In Greek mythology, there's the Seven Sisters, and
yes,
and there's Pleiades, and
yep.
Anyway, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some sort of relationship because, then there's the Olympics and et cetera. And so, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's the names are very ancient on our planet as well. So, who knows?
Well, it goes into all kinds of cultures and tribes.
Right.
It's in the Bible, Pleiades. It's everywhere. So for them to say, yes, we are the Pleiadians, and giving me the genuine experience of who they are, these compassionate beings of very high order. So that location is, I don't know, probably something for the future. So anybody listening in, you can do just a little 2-mile hike up to Winchester Mountain, and you will have a 360 view of what looks like the Himalayas up there. It's just staggering. So you go up to Bellingham, Washington, and go up the Mount Baker Highway 542, I think it is, and go up to either Gold Run Pass or Winchester Mountain at Twin Lakes, do the little hike, and maybe have the experience I had.
And the view from the coast all the way there is incredible to see it.
Yeah, Winchester has an old fire lookout, and it was all dilapidated. And the Mount Baker Hiking Club went up there year after year, hauling stuff up, and turned it into a little hut where they have a cot in there and a Coleman stove and all kinds of good stuff, and a lightning rod, which was helpful one year. But anybody can go up there and stay in the little hut. It's a freebie, and the views are, it used to be a fire lookout, so views are 360. of all the glaciated peaks. So it's not like other areas in Washington where you go to Mount Rainier and you got Mount Rainier and nothing else, you know. This is big volcano, Mount Baker, and then all the glaciated peaks. Then this red rock, Mount Larrabee to the north with the Pleiades. And you have American border peak, and behind that is Canadian border peak. So you have the border of Canada and the U.S. going right through that mountain range. And then you can see, since it pretty much ends the Cascade Range right there, right behind it is all this farmland in Chilliwack, BC. It's amazing. It's a one-of-a-kind place up there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful. I've only been on this side, but it's amazing. I'd like to spend more time up there. So let me ask you this. One of the things if I back up a bit, I was going to get into superior technology. The road to superior technology is wrought with disaster to the effect that really interests me. This statement interests me to a degree that, you know, we're I don't even know how to put this, but obviously our technology is not superior, and what we're going to be doing for the next 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, hopefully 1 million years, is discovering technology that could possibly put us in peril. And there are many scientists who believe that that would be the downfall of humanity, of Homo sapiens, is our own technology. We literally destroy ourselves. So do you think that these visitors are here to prevent that, or is there some other reason? I mean, do you have any insight on why they would be here and why they would be communicating with you in this way?
I think, and this gets subjective again, but it seems though a lot of people have this, that we are spiritual beings, and that a lot of us have volunteered to come here. People say, well, I'm on a mission, you know. So volunteered to come here and do their part. And it seems as though we're doing our part to set up for this disclosure. And I think just kind of like what you're saying right there, if you really look at what's happening with technology, it kind of doesn't look that good for the future, really, to me.
Exactly.
You know, and there seems to, you know, not so much intervention, but I don't know. I think disclosure would make a lot of sense, though.
Right. We've had a lot of close calls.
I think people are at that point where so many people are at the point where they could handle disclosure. What were you going to say?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but we've had a lot of close calls to the point where there's several spots on this planet that we've killed. They're dead, and they're going to be dead for as long as we're here. So whether it be radiation or other kinds of pollution, it's if
you really look into it, it's horrifying.
It's not really even a near miss or close call. I mean, it's that part of the world is dead, those small pieces, and as we expand into every nook and cranny of the planet, I mean, it's obvious that we're going to exploit the resources and whatever else is there, and it's not a good thing for the planet.
No, and there's a lot of places in the world that they want to move out of third world into the first world, and unfortunately that means a lot more pollution, et cetera, et cetera. I was shocked about the Salton Sea, where I'd gone as a kid. I remember as a kid, Salton Sea, and then it was a playground of the rich and famous and all that. And then I look into it more recently, and the Salton Sea is totally a polluted disaster because of runoff of fertilizers and so on. I went, wow.
Right.
Wow. And there's just so many places like that. So we can't, I guess the way to look at it is we just can't keep going the way we're going, but we're going that way. So it makes makes perfect sense for disclosure and maybe a reorienting of, what we can do with things, and maybe a little more introduction of a technology that would be beneficial. One thing that came up over and over was the term critical mass, which I never understood. And I knew that was the ET term given to me. I'm going, critical mass? What is that? So I thought, well, maybe critical mass is you have to have enough of the population of the planet to a point of accepting that, hey, ET contact would be cool, rather than the 1950s thing of run for the bomb shelter, So that could seem like critical mass would be good.
Maybe disclosure means enlightenment. I mean, we've probably came to a point of at least diminishing return on our investment in the planet, meaning that that anything that we try to squeeze out of it anymore, the consequences are dire. So either we back up or we become enlightened. I don't know. What are your thoughts there? And let me just let you close with that. I want you to kind of give me one final thought, because we got a minute, and give me one final thought that will tie this all together. And I'm interested to hear what you think is going to come next.
Yeah, I think we're at a point of, I just term it grinding. Like in a regression session, you get to a point of release, and then you don't want to continue the session, or you just grind away at it. So we're at a point now where we can see where our technology is, it's going the wrong way, and it's grinding. It's going to grind the whole thing out. So I think critical mass is a point where everything is set for disclosure to be okay, and then disclosure would be this whole new phase where people would wake up out of their hypnotic state and see what's really going on, and then move into this different direction with ETs. Almost like graduating from the daycare. Move out of the daycare, and now you're in first grade, and then you go on up, and you're a daycare teacher down the line. So I really do think we're headed for disclosure. I think that's a real thing. And it won't be through the government. It'll be done with the average person.
And again, my guest tonight has been Tom Sanger, and I want to thank Tom very much. And if you're interested in speaking with Tom, you can contact him on Facebook, and he's easy to find there. So, Tom Sanger, thank you very much, and nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate a very good conversation.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by Eleon. You can find all Eleon's work online at Heart Dance Records.